Romans, the Jerusalem Council, A.D. 50. Paul writes Romans, A.D. 57. Paul martyred in Rome, A.D. 67 through 68. The letter to the church at Rome is one of Paul's most magisterial books. At the time of writing, Paul had never visited the vibrant church at Rome, though he clearly held the church in high regard and longed to visit it soon. He wrote this theological treatise in order to summarize the message of the gospel for a church at such a critical cultural nexus in the world of that day. Paul began with a formal introduction of himself and his calling as a slave or servant of Jesus. Paul then described the plight of sinners living in a fallen world, who willingly chose to worship created things rather than the Creator. All human sin is explained by this foolish exchange. God must judge human sin. His holiness cannot dwell in the presence of sin, and his justice necessitates a proper punishment for all wickedness. Death is the only just wage for sin, and all people, Jew and Gentile alike, should receive their just condemnation. But God graciously made a way for salvation through Jesus. God poured out his punishment for human sin on Christ, who served as God's appointed wrath-bearing substitute. Those who place their faith in Jesus are forgiven because of Jesus' work on the cross. Jesus pays for their sin. In addition, God's people are given the righteousness that Christ earned through his perfect life. They can know peace and fellowship with God. This is true for Jews, though most will scorn Jesus' offer of salvation, and for Gentiles who can now be grafted into God's family tree. Nothing in all creation can take God's love away from those he has saved, because salvation is of God, from God, and for God. Those whom God saves offer up their lives as a living sacrifices to God, which is their act of proper worship. Paul ends his letter by demonstrating the scope of the transformation that the gospel should produce. Christians should worship God through their gifts and service to the church by living what is